Hello there and welcome to the studios of Weekend Deal. It's always a pleasure to have you join us on the show. Yes, we are still on the matter of flood that is currently ravaging the country as we speak. And according to NEMA, that about 600 people have lost their lives so far, and lots of property destroyed, communities submerged. And of course, UNICEF is saying that about 2.5 million Nigerians are needing humanitarian assistance. And of course, about 1.5 children are also affected by the flood. And just yesterday, King Charles III wrote an open letter to President Mohammed Buhari sympathizing with the victims. But the question we are asking is that this flood, what was it that we did not do to avert this particular flood of 2022? Because we have had several floods in the past. Is it that we don't learn from any past experience? Of course, we will continue discussing this issue to saying that we put an end to this menace in Nigeria. Welcome once again. My name is Suleiman Babajia Usman. All right, thank you for staying with us. We know that climate change is real. It's a global challenge, and of course, it's not unconnected to what we are experiencing as we talk about flood in Nigeria today. But the question is, or rather, most experts concluded that if Nigeria had taken some necessary actions, perhaps what we are experiencing today would have been averted. Now, let's join Francis Obi for the background report.
Floods are major disasters affecting many countries of the world, as it has posed tremendous danger to people's lives and properties. Floods cause about 1/3 of all death, 1/3 of all injuries, and 1/3 of all damage from natural disasters.
The kind of flooding we have in Nigeria now is a combination of two major floods. We have had intense rainfall, because the amount of rainfall that falls per minute or within a particular time matters a lot. And then you talk about infrastructure to control that flood or to carry it. Then you also have the issue of spillways, the water that was released upstream in the Camilus, they say Lagdo dams. So when you combine this, you see why we have the kind of flooding we have in Nigeria. If we had managed it, maybe that wouldn't have been much news.
Heavy seasonal rains are a regular feature of life in Nigeria, and towns close to the country's main rivers are particularly vulnerable.
I know a similar flooding happened in 2012, and I also suffered it because I was supposed to have traveled from the east to Abuja, but the normal route, which is through Kogi, was cordoned off because people were sleeping on the road. Then I had to go through Makurdi and pass through River Benue, and instead of River Niger that I passed after the confluence in Lokoja. So it happened before. So you see an interval of about 10 years. So you have this kind of episodic high intensity rains of this magnitude happening maybe within intervals. We know that there will be rainy season, but we do not know the intensity. We do not know the timing. We do not know how long, the duration. So these are some of the variables that you find within climate change calculations.
Nigeria has several dams along its rivers, ranging from huge hydroelectric stations to smaller constructions for irrigation and fishing. These structures can in theory help manage water levels, but in reality many have been poorly managed, contributing to the build-up of water levels, thus endangering nearby towns and villages. Some have argued that the release of excess water from dams in neighboring Cameroon could be one of the factors responsible for the recent flooding in Nigeria.
The story of the Lagdo Dam is an old story. I told you there was an immense flood of this magnitude 10 years ago, 2012. Why did we wait for another 10 years and we are still blaming Lagdo Dam? This tells you the situation. Nothing is happening, because I learned that when Cameroonians were building that dam, there was an understanding that downstream, another dam should also be built, to more like a check dam to counter. If they release water, that one will hold the water. Was it built? What kind of flood-resistant houses do we have? We do not have those as well. Then how prepared are we? What are the institutional mechanisms in place to manage flooding?
The indiscriminate disposal of waste is damaging the street as well as blocking the drains during the raining season. Therefore, the need for good attitudinal change is imperative to checking improper waste disposal.
Water carries all solid waste that are improperly disposed and take them down to somewhere and use it to silt up the drains. And it becomes a problem, a flood problem. And when you have some of these solid waste blocking, water is supposed to infiltrate into the soils. It's supposed to drain, but when you find that the capacity of the soil, the field capacity of the soil has been overburdened, and the land is level, it floods.
Nigeria's flooding is mainly human-induced, with current poor town planning practices and inadequate or non-existent environmental infrastructure contributing to the issue.
When you talk about maybe the Niger Delta areas or coastal areas, you do not build houses anyhow. You have to find an adaptive way to build houses in technology that is adaptive to those environments, so that when this kind of hazard come, the impact will not be much. But because we have no plans, we have no architecture, we have no mechanism for this, it carries everybody, it does this kind of damage. I was listening to the news last night, and one of the states, they said the governor, immediately he heard that places have been flooded, released 1 billion. Why would you wait for things to happen before you release 1 billion? This should be an ongoing thing. You should be proactive. You should know that this kind of thing to happen. You have the mechanism to address it. You don't wait to be reactive.
If the impact of flooding is to be reduced in the future, the consequences of rapid urbanization and poor urban planning needs to be addressed. Our focus on Weekend Deal today will be on flooding in Nigeria and probable solutions to curbing its spread.
All right, thank you for staying with us. And let me remind you that this program is participatory. Our numbers will be on the screen any moment so that you can send in your contributions. Tell us how the flood is affecting you today. And of course, we get to share your thought with other viewers as well. Now, let's welcome to our studios Professor Angelo. He's the Director General and CEO of National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, Nigeria. You're welcome to our studios.
Okay, good morning, Nigerians. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
You've seen the report, you've seen how bad Nigerians have been affected by the 2022 flood in Nigeria today. And I know that your agency work hand in hand with NIMET and other agencies concerned in terms of weather predictions and early warnings. Now, I know you always map our strategy to avert situations that we are being confronted with today, but obviously that has not worked. Why?
Well, if you look at it, a lot of factors are responsible for this flooding, as we know. One of them is the natural factor. When you have a lot of rainfall, so at times it's very difficult, given our engineering infrastructure, the drainages, for it to contain such amount because of the volume. And secondly, even such infrastructure are inadequate. Some of our cities, they don't have inadequate drainages, and also we don't take care of them. Third factor we know is indiscriminate dumping of refuse. Even the drainages we have, they usually get clogged. So when it rains, water must find its way. And we all know that there is issue of climate change, which is responsible for this increase in the amount of precipitation, leading to increase in the rainfall. Some are talking about the melting of the ice and the nightfall also. All these are factors that are responsible for that. So coming to our engagement with relevant stakeholders, we usually hold meetings with NIMET, NEMA. There are agencies under the Federal Ministry of Water Resources to look at the weather forecast ahead of time, to strategize and see how we are going to avert some of this crisis, especially of the flooding. So one of them, we also work with the state governments, even the local governments. But if you look at it, a lot of people are mostly adamant. Some will go and build their houses at the floodplains, and they don't listen to warnings when they are told to vacate such places. They refuse. So when it rains, it usually affects them. So it's a serious issue that we need to strategize further and see how we can tackle it.
Yeah, let's just take this report from NTA Adamawa to talk to us about what is really happening there when we talk about flood, 2022 flood in Nigeria, and after that we engage further.
Just imagine your home and farm submerged, properties destroyed, your health affected, and living outside the comfort of your home. Such is the story of Angelo Camilus, a resident of Oromji, one of the communities affected by flood.
Over a month, I was hospitalized due to a snake bite occasioned by the flood that destroyed our farmland, among other valuables.
The impact of flood across the 21 local government areas in Adamawa State was marked as the worst ever experienced since 2012, with estimated number of 171,000 people affected and 49 deaths as a result of heavy rainfall, coupled with the release of excess water from the Lagdo Dam in northern Cameroon that was constructed since 1982.
We have been having incessant flooding as a result of opening of the gates of Lagdo Dam, being that we are at the lower course of the river. So whenever the gate of Lagdo Dam is opened, then we'll be experiencing flooding in this part of the country. There's even a proposal for the construction of the Asinhausa Dam, which is solely technically intended to limit or contain the excess water that is coming from Lagdo Dam, and invariably attenuating the volume of water that will flow from that dam into lower part of the stream.
But when it meets some man-made activity that will trigger it more, then it is going to be devastating to it. That is what we are facing. The activity of humans, that is cutting down trees, is the main aspect that is causing flood.
This is GDSS Limawa. The school was used as one of the camps for the displaced victims. Fortunately, there is an intervention for the school session to continue.
The victims occupy all the classes. The principals went to the board and informed them. Then they asked the school so that we cannot stop the pupils from learning. Management told us to look at where we can relocate so that we can continue with our learning. Then we find a school, a nearby school, with the pupils, the students. We went there. We spent about 3 weeks there, pending on the gradual process of relocation of the victims.
attention needs to be given to food security, as it is fundamental to human existence since thousands of hectares of land are lost to the disaster.
The experience from Adamawa State there. Now, Prof, the issue of Lagdo Dam, I know the Honorable Minister of Water Resources said that it's not the main source of the experience we are having today, but should we ignore it?
Well, I don't think we should ignore it, as you have said, but the Honorable Minister of Water Resources, I think he is the right authority at the helm of affairs, and there are those that have the right data. So as mentioned by him, that the water that is coming into Nigeria through the major rivers, we can say River Benue and River Niger, just account for 20% of the.
That's Lagdo Dam amount for, I mean, to 20% of what we're experiencing now.
Not only Lagdo Dam, we have other tributaries coming into the country. So 80% of the water we have is from the rainfall. So we cannot dispute that because he's the right authority and he has all the relevant agencies under him, research agencies that usually monitor this, and the regulatory agencies. So to do with that, as you have said, yeah, it shouldn't also be neglected, because no matter how small, if water can just be released unannounced without informing the country, so it's going to contribute, certainly, because the water will just flow at once, not like the rainfall, since rains are usually isolated. It happens here, it happens there. So I think there is need for us to look at the issue of Lagdo Dam and revisit the MOU that was signed, if there was any, as mentioned by the Honorable Minister. I think it's the right thing to do.
It's actually, confirmed that he has looked to the relevant agencies, relevant authorities, and then he cannot see any MOU that is being signed between Nigeria and the Cameroonian authorities. But let's dig deeper, because climate change is here with us. There's nothing we can do about it, even though we don't contribute much to its impact. But we feel the impact of the climate change. Of course, it's very obvious with the current flood we are experiencing today. But for those who say that it's not, they still have doubt over the advances of climate change, what should you be telling them? What should we be telling them as we speak in terms of, cutting down trees, dumping refuse on drainages and building on waterways and all of that?
Climate change is real. There's no doubt about it. Whoever is in doubt, let him just look at his immediate environment. If he's a grown-up person, at least somebody of 40 years, let him reflect back how the weather was when he was a child, how the ecosystem was. You see there were a lot of trees around, you can see some animals roaming about, but nowadays you hardly see them. They have all disappeared. We have cut down our trees and we don't replant. And you can see the weather has changed. Whenever it's a rainy season, the amount of rain we receive is completely different in terms of the amount we received before. And when it comes to the dry season, also the heat is enormous. So there's no doubt about this climate change. A lot of ecosystems has been destroyed, and we are also one of those responsible. We, the human beings, our activities is destroying the environment. We burn indiscriminately. We cut down trees, we burn this firewood. Some produce charcoal. When you do that, you release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and this CO2, the carbon dioxide, is one of the major contributors to the global warming, apart from other sources that are man-made. So this climate change is real. We must all come together and find solution to it. Let's stop some of these things we do that impacts on the climate. Let's imbibe the culture of tree planting. Let's stop using firewood as much as we can afford, especially those that can afford to buy cooking gas. Cooking gas is cleaner and it's also safe for you because this firewood we use, it affects our health. It's one of those responsible for the death of a lot of, especially women, due to the inhalation of this smoke. It affects them, causing a lot of health hazards. But most of us are not aware of it. You go to the hospital suffering from one disease or the other, not knowing that you are responsible for this kind of ailment. So we must come together and see how we can salvage the situation.
We must come together to see how we can salvage this situation. And of course, one of the worst hit states is, Kogi State. So at some point, vehicles were not coming to Abuja or to northern part of the country. Why? Because of the, blockage there. So let's take this next report from NTA Lokoja.
The 2022 flood situation impacted both individuals and several communities with serious socio-economic and environmental consequences on communities such as Adonkolo, Bata, Gadumo, Ganaja, and other neighboring communities. So far, no fewer than 500 houses and properties worth several millions of naira were said to have been submerged.
Just I want to border the taxi now from here to this is 100 naira, 200 naira, whereas it's 50 naira before. So it has affected us economically, socially, everything has affected us.
Most of the road that they will pass through to the market is flooded with water. They cannot meet up. And even the tankers that need to bring fuel to the state or out of the state, they cannot even make a way out.
For most residents in Lokoja, whose houses and farmlands are completely submerged, it has been a period of pain, confusion, and concern about what the future holds.
This Gadumo, it affected us. 2020, we see water like this, but this year is more than that.
Looking at few weeks back, this particular restaurant was alive and bubbling, but as at today, this is what is left.
Yes, the experience is very, very bad. The water is too much. You see, we cannot be able to stay. That makes us to live here.
While many business owners as Hajia Hawa are still counting losses in their businesses, so also are residents whose houses have been affected. Mr. Abah describes their situation as pathetic, as many of them have now been forced to leave their houses and squat around with neighbors until when the situation improves.
They are saying this climate change, that will be more than that every year. Where are we going to run to? If this place, your house doesn't fall, if you try to, we'll still pack back. Like my own house is at the other side. The zinc have rot because water climbed it. I've seen 2 or 3 that have gotten broken. There, some houses have broken. A landlord who have 2 houses, 3 houses around here, they are now a tenant. No money to buy another land to build. If government can help us and come to our aid, it will be so impressive to government. Virgin land, or that they can give us virgin land. I don't know what government can help us. If it is not so, if you dry it again, we will pack in.
As infrastructures such as roads, power plants, and bridges are damaged and disrupted, a lot of social economic activities have been put to a standstill in Lokoja due to the flood, forcing a lot of residents to leave their houses. Presently, the only solutions that a lot of victims of these natural disasters have resolved to is prayers. Prayers that the water recedes so that they can gradually move back to their houses. Ironically, this is a prayer that may never come true for others, since the houses are already completely submerged and the tendency of the house collapsing is very, very high.
That is indeed sad, Khadija. Thank you for the reports. And, you know, Prof, you saw some of the trauma people are going through. And then basically, it's all about relocating these people to a different settlement. But who is going to do that? We know that there is ecological fund and a lot of, you know, states are sitting on it. Do you think that fund is being judiciously, you know, used?
Well, I'm not in the position to say whether it is judicially used or not, because I think there is the right agency to do that. I know they disperse to the state governments, even the local governments. They have their share apart from other agencies. Really, these funds are meant to tackle such issues, but I'm not in position to say whether there is judicial use or not, because I have not gone around the states to see the projects executed, and so. But I believe if we can use such funds judiciously, rightly, it will go a long way in assisting in solving some of these issues. It's one aspect of the issue, that is provision of adequate drainages. It may go a long way in assisting, even though, you know, the quantum of money required to build such infrastructure is very huge. But when we start to pump such monies into such projects, maybe after some years, some of the states might have reached the adequacy of those infrastructure required to take care of such water that we experience during the rainy season.
Thank you very much, Professor Ali Joro, for speaking to us. Professor Ali Joro is the DG CEO of Nasria. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
We've been receiving some messages here. This one says, this flooding has become a yearly occurrence. What is the federal government doing towards curtailing it? Do we have plans to build our own dam? This one is coming from Ezom Kwasi. He didn't tell us where you are texting us from. But the next one says, good morning. The problem is government negligence. Even the support that they are giving is not reaching the people who are mostly being affected. This one is coming from Aliu Zuzu from Benue State. Now, we know that the FCT, according to what we've heard, most also from the guests we had yesterday, they say Abuja were able to heed to the early warning, so they took necessary measures to ensuring that they curtail the effect of the 2022 flood in the FCT. So let's take this report from NTA Abuja to look at its impact on the FCT roads.
Following a series of heavy downpour of rains that lasted days, widespread flooding wreaked havoc across the Federal Capital Territory, with a number of roads submerged in mass of water. The deluge has affected the condition of major roads and interstate routes in the FCT, reducing their quality and conditions, making them impassable, resulting to gridlocks in parts of Local Goma, central areas like Area 1 and some parts of Gariki. The questions on the minds of many are, is the bad nature of our roads reversible? Is it about the quality of these roads, or are there human factors involved?
More than the 6,000 kilometers square area within the FCT, not the FCC, are not even serviced by good roads. The BO7 cadastral zone of Katampe extension is below the road level. And by implication, if it's below the road level, it exposes it to a floodplain. That's a road that takes you into the Gishiri from Nikon Junction in. in Maitama, directly opposite. When you check out these things, when you come to Durumi, by the former old secretariat, you see all those areas. We're not only just talking of qualitative road, we're talking of even quantitative.
The little challenge we have, of course, which of course I know that the government is battling with, are the roads within the area councils. Areas like Buari, within some areas, in Kubwa and Nyanya, and all that, we still relatively have roads that are still being constructed. We cannot completely say that these roads are not motorable, but the challenge is that with the rains and other activities that go on within this environment, we still have elements of potholes and challenges. Of recent, we notice construction work or rehabilitation work on parts of Life comes through to Gwarimpa that is ongoing, and that is because we made that recommendation.
Commercial activities grounded to a halt in some parts of the FCT and FCC due to flooded roads, blocked drainages and erosions of tarred roads, which has become a common sight, posing further worries as to the effect of this unwanted development on economic growth.
An advice that is necessary to be given at this time is for Nigerians, road users in the FCT, to exercise patience.
As the year gradually draws to an end, a clarion call for improved road maintenance in the Federal Capital Territory gently knocks on the door to economic development.
All right, let's welcome to our studio Dr. Abbas G. Idris. Is the Director General, FCT Emergency Management Agency. You're welcome to our studios.
Thank you. Good morning, viewers. Thank you for having me.
I'm tempted to give you a pass mark.
Thank you.
Because from yesterday, some of the guests we had commended FCT for their management of the flood this year. I know you've had your share experience in the past.
Yeah.
What happened? How did you achieve this level of success?
We have had shares of flooding in the previous years, and that had given us a serious concern as a government, and so we were not relenting. We have to go deep into all other means, legitimate means, to ensure that to find out the cause of flooding. Because if you look at the way FCT is structured, there's no way we should be having flooding in the FCT. And so we had to go into scientific studies. We developed the hazard mapping of the entire FCT, identifying the kind of hazard in each locality. If you call a town or any satellite town or any city, I can tell you the kind of hazard that is existing in the entire Federal Capital Territory. Apart from that, we do the vulnerability and capacity assessment also, because you need to align the hazard mapping with the vulnerability and see the coping capacity of your community. And then, having identified that, we now identify that the whole thing is human induced. So if it is human induced, we can be able to manage it very well. And so we don't wait for the rainy season to start waiting to get flood before we start intervening. What we do is that we carried out a massive assessment based on the study we carried out on the hazards mapping that we did. And then we go there and see why is Kubwa is prone to flooding. Then we look at the structure, we look at the roads network, we look at the waste disposal, we look at the living of how the community is also living, and look at their markets and all other social activities. Then we see if there is anything that is causing any hazard, then building hazard, then we now have to team up and then remove that thing with immediate effect. We don't wait for the rainy season. So we start this during the dry season, and then during the rainy season, we now mount our own structures and surveillance. It is only in FCT that we have volunteers in all the wards that are trained. Volunteers, we have disaster vanguards, and then we have also volunteers who are doing their own surveillance. And then it is only in this FCT that we incorporated these volunteers into our daily activities, including the local divers. Why did we bring in the local divers? Is because we feel that these local divers, they are expert in their own field, in their own locality, who can dive into the water and bring anything. In fact, there are some that are traditionally identified that except them, nobody can enter the water. And we brought them, we trained them, we gave them you do this diving, you do this rescue with your traditional calabash.
Let me say you're localizing the solution.
Very good. We localize the solution. So we say, okay, we now have this. We can give you life jacket that can save you first before you carry out rescue. We'll give you life buoy that you can go into the water. On top of the water, you carry out any rescue, put the person, give him a life jacket, and then bring him out on the life buoy. We can also give you a speed boat where necessary. You can do it. Where we cannot, we can now provide, we have canoes that are also resting by the riverside. So all this we have done, and we do review our activities day in, day out, because the disaster is changing, it's dynamic because of the climate change. What happened last year cannot be the same. So you cannot apply the same method in rescuing person last year in the same particular spot compared to now this year, because of the volume of the water. And again, you see that if you go around, we having identified all these bad spots where there is a flood prone. We have erected billboards notifying the resident of the FCT that this place is a flood prone. So when you come to that side and you see water, please don't cross. And we have also identified some slip roads that are very dangerous. One of them killed a very senior officer one time in 2019. We block such slip road completely for the motorists so that nobody will be tempted to pass through, whether there's rain or no rain.
Yes, you have taken these proactive measures, and one is just curious that is it that the states, governments don't see the need to take these similar proactive measures to avert, flood excesses in the country?
Well, with due respect to the state governors, I think they are neglecting that aspect, which is very, very crucial. In fact, at this time that we are, all the 3 tiers of government should give priority to disaster management, because it is something that is reoccurring day in, day out. You don't have to wait for rain. Apart from the flood, we have other associated disasters. And we sit down and say, natural disaster. What is natural about disaster? There is nothing natural about disaster. It is only the aspect. Water is natural. Rain will come, it's natural. But is it every rain that is a disaster? No. So if you clear the way, you don't block the waterways, you don't build indiscriminately, you don't dump refuse indiscriminately, there's no way rain can be harmful to you.
This time around, let's quickly cross over to rivers and see what is really happening there in terms of their 2022 flood experience.
The reoccurring incidents of perennial flooding across the country have become a challenge with increased intensity in Nigeria. The 2022 devastating flood in Rivers State has continued to displace thousands of residents in the 4 affected local government areas situated along the banks of Orashi River. They include Abuja Odua, Ahoda East, Ahoda West, and Oba Ebwema Ndoni local government areas of the state.
Within our area, the flood has been extremely severe. While other places have had their fair share, we seem to have been worstly hit. Suffering here is palpable. You don't need to take more than a few steps to feel it in your marrows what the people are going through. The cry, the desperation, the displacement, the utter despair of men and women. I'm not talking about children now.
Farmlands, livestock, schools, properties and buildings worth millions of naira have been submerged by flood, including loss of lives, deterioration of health, and emotional trauma.
Since the morning I never chop, make una see money I want to buy fish, 1,000. I don't find fish for village, you reach here, no fish, no chop. Water don't carry the village. Hey, make I die.
Then I have 5,000 fishes. Before I could get to my backyard, I have found out that the flood have taken over everywhere.
About no less than 6 farms have water have covered.
The children who ordinarily would have been busy with school activities or fishing cannot do any due to the level of the flooding. Disturbing is the fact that there is no access roads to these communities, as people have resorted to using various means to evacuate victims that are trapped. Following this ugly development, most production companies in the areas have shut down, non-availability of food items, increase in prices of few available farm produce, and other commodities.
Number one will be hunger. That's the first thing. The other one is, how do they get their lives back?
Una go help us bring something for us. If you rice money, make we carry down. My children don't stop school. No anywhere where then they go now.
Most of the farm produce that we use, it comes mostly from these flooded areas. Abuja area and other, those are the people that produce cassava, which is the gari aspect of it. It's high now. Before it was 5,000 naira a basin. Now I'm hearing it's a 7 or 8 thereabout.
Inflation, prices of goods and commodities has gone up. We are buying rice for 27, 30 thereabout. But now as I speak with you, a bag of rice has gone up to 40 and it's still climbing. The other day, you know, we are in the main city of Port Harcourt. The other day there was a panic buying. Everybody started scrambling for jerry can and everything to get fuel because no supply is coming in.
However, the Rivers State government has donated 1 billion naira to all flood victims in the state, built IDP camps for victims, and also set up a task force committee on flood to ensure that the relief materials are distributed evenly.
All right, you have it. And this next message says, my name is Charles. Climate change, I doubt much. Can we go back to 1972 or thereabout? Same flood occur, if not worse. Well, I have not checked my history to, say maybe it's right or wrong. But very important, 2012 was one of the devastating, flood years we've experienced when we talk about flood in Nigeria. 10 years
after,
it is expected that if we are taking necessary measures, perhaps we will not be experiencing what we are experiencing today. And mind you, we have what is called ecological fund. I asked the DG Nigeria earlier on. He said he's not in the state. You, of course, you are in the state. Of course, the FCT. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, ecological funds are shared every month to all the states and the local governments, and it's meant to tackle those problems, ecological problems, and flood is one of them. And I think what some states are doing, they have been silent about it. And that is why they are not focusing the money into that direction. But we in the FCT, we are lucky. We are using our ecological funds very judiciously. And then apart from that, we are also empowered as a state emergency management agency to do whatever we could to ensure that we come up with strategies that will make a zero tolerance to flooding in the FCT. And with that, by the grace of God, we are achieving so. So there is that political will, and that is why you could see every hour demolition is going on in the FCT. Because once we identified a structure that is obstructing the free flow of water is being removed, that credit must go to the Honorable Minister of the FCT, Mohammed Musa, because he gave us that political power to do whatever we can within the law to ensure that no life or property is lost in the FCT, and we are achieving that by God's grace.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. It's been a pleasure. The call is, we hope that other states will learn from your empirical examples. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Now, let's look at the health implication vis-a-vis flood in Nigeria.
Cholera, typhoid, hepatitis A, salmonella, shigella. The government can help by providing enough drainages in rural area, enough waterways, creating good channels, better preparedness in case of flood. If you go to these most rural areas, you will see they don't have good drainages. They just make roads without drainages, without future, without thinking flood can happen. And so when it starts raining heavily, everywhere gets flooded. For the citizen, I think it's necessary for us to know, one, we have to boil our water very well, avoid, during flood, avoid drinking water from well. But if they don't have any other means, boil the water. We wash our hand adequately. We cook our food adequately. We wash every food we get adequately. Most rural area, they defecate openly. I don't blame them. They don't have enough resources. But during this period, if it's possible to reduce or stop defecating openly, because by the time you defecate somewhere, when it starts raining, the same stool or dried stool will be flowing around, and they are source of typhoid, cholera, and other diseases.
Let's take this report packaged by Julieta Aina.
These are some of the fallouts of the excessive rainfall that has left a trail of devastation across 33 states of the country. Reports indicate that thousands of those killed and homes affected are located in food-producing states.
My farm too has been affected. My side, Borno State and other farms. I have some farms last in Jigawa, another aspect of Bauchi. It reached a certain stage of germination before it has been affected. I know it has been a warning, but we have no option. We cannot leave our farm to go to other side.
The farmers in these states are currently counting their losses. Many lives have been lost and homes destroyed. To crown it all, experts are predicting food insecurity and a further increase in food prices.
You know, the price is a function of demand and supply. Because of this flood, a lot of farmlands have been lost. So obviously the supply is going to be low and the demand high. So prices will go up.
Some of these crops do not handle excess water very well. So that when flood comes, it actually tears them down from the trees. So that is going to affect us here. It's also going to affect our export potential.
In the years between 2011 and 2020, statistics show that Nigeria experienced about 103 flood incidents across the 36 states and Abuja, with almost 10 million people affected. The most devastating of these flooding incidents was in 2012, followed by another in 2018, and now in 2022.
We see that whole Lokoja axis those people shouldn't be living in those areas. Or even if they are going to live there, it should be seasonal. But once we begin to get into the rainy season, NIMET usually puts out its prediction of what will happen. But I can assure you that every year we're going to see flooding. The only question is, what is the scale? Based on all these fundamental issues that haven't been addressed. So we need to relocate those people.
While some have pointed fingers at the dam in Cameroon that releases water periodically, why have the floods continued to be more devastating since 2012?
When Lagdo Dam is being built in Cameroon Republic in 1982, they are supposed to be a sort of buffer dam down here in Nigeria, whereby when Lagdo releases its water, then the dam here in Nigerian downstream will block the water and release it gradually into River Benue. But that has not been built. Similarly, when you look at what is happening along River Lima into Benue, into River Niger, there are supposed to be holder dams in between Goroyo and River Niger, where it empties into River Niger. But all those holder dams were not built. So if government should decide to build those dams, definitely the devastation will be reduced. Similarly, River Benue, River Niger are silted. So the tributaries empty into them are much, much lower. So they cannot empty into River Niger, they cannot empty into River Benue because the rivers are higher. So now when the water reaches River Niger or River Benue, instead of going in, it goes back. So this is another thing. We need to dredge, and continuous dredging is costly. So the best is to build buffer dams.
Experts say floods in Nigeria have over the years become worse due to inadequate flood defenses, the effects of climate change, and many other reasons. Since food-producing states have almost always been the worst hit, what can be done to mitigate the impact on the agricultural sector?
There is no government that wants its citizens to suffer. So when government talks and says, please move, please move. When government says, please don't plant in so areas, please don't plant in so areas, we need to listen to them. As I told you, I'm supposed to have planted in a lowland. But when they release the seasonal rainfall predictions by NIMET and the flood notice by the hydrological services of Nigeria, I did not, because I listened. If I had not listened, I would have incurred a lot of losses.
Knowledge, they say, is power. Some farmers say while the early warning signs do not trickle down to farmers at the local level, it may be time to start thinking of other ways to disseminate this information to those that need it, as the right information at the right time can make or break.
The farmer, as illiterate as he is, how can he be communicated? The channel of communication is very poor. There must be a practical involvement of traditional rulers and the state government and the federal government to make sure that, okay, when they identified on the mapping, they will just put a red flags from this point to this point. Anybody who is farming on this, we expect you to leave this place, move to the other side. This is the only solution. And this kind of practicability is not there.
Apart from the early warning alerts released and weather advisories issued by government agencies, what steps should Nigeria take to prevent reoccurrence of this annual disaster?
We also need to build buffers, barriers, and what we call levees. If you go to the US, a lot of the coastal areas have levees, and it will encircle an area that is prone to flooding. In some cases, it may not completely eradicate flooding, but what it does is it gives you time to be able to evacuate so you don't get flooded out and killed.
Weather predictions for 2022 were out early enough in February for stakeholders to prepare, and maybe the magnitude of this flooding could have been reduced. To prevent future occurrences, experts say it may be time for all concerned to start taking responsibility.
All right, the impact of flood on the agri sector there. And yeah, before I engage our next guest, let me take this message. This one says, good morning, Weekend, in regards to DG Nezra. Of course, we had him earlier on the show. We have very weak institutions and lack the political will to address our challenges. We must be deliberate to strengthen our institutions. Benue flood case has been underreported nationally. This one is coming from James from Makodi. Thank you. Of course, probably next week we will focus more also on other states that have not been captured.
Over the years, Lagos State has experienced flood, with several warnings and sensitization of the dangers of illegal dumping of refuse on waterways. Lagosians are still not complying, therefore experience flood, especially in flood-prone areas.
It has been an annual thing that flood, especially Lagos State, flood used to disturb people. I think number one, I've also once been a victim when I was in somewhere in Lagos State, that when rain starts like this, we have to move our load from one place to another to secure our property. So it's a normal thing. Rain will fall, and Lagos State particularly is a land of water.
The magnitude of the effect of flood cannot be overemphasized. People are being displaced and loss of lives and properties is on the increase. It also has large social consequences for community and individual, as well as destruction of crops, loss of livestock and deteriorating health condition owing to waterborne diseases. In times past, Lagos mainland residents used to mock the Lagos Island residents as though flooding is only possible on the island, and they are assured that their areas are flood-proof. All that assumption has been laid to rest with a recent event where almost every part of Lagos experienced flood.
The fact that we have a proud knowledge or an incline into what is going to happen this year. Then secondly, it's also a human factor because the dams, I was told, I was not based on the news I've gotten, is the dams, some dams are overflowing and every other thing. So it's both human and natural.
The effect of flooding is not limited to damage of properties or potential loss of lives, but also the disruption in livelihood, communication, and an economic loss to the government.
Despite everything that has happened in Lagos State, the torrential rainfalls, what we see is that we have flooding, what we call temporary flooding, and within an hour or two, you see that the water will subside. The water, when you start having issues, when water didn't subside, is stagnant for 2-3 days, then that's when you start having issues. But in Lagos, if you go around, I've been able to go around and I've seen the amount of resources put into clearing of drains and environmental issues, despite the fact that the people could do better. Lagos State has taken the initiative to go the extra mile.
Every year, there is sensitization on indiscriminate dumping of refuse on water channels, etc. Have we learned anything from past flood experience? Proactive and preventive options involving structural and non-structural measures need to be adopted and implemented at curbing the menace of flood.
That's the much we can take from the program, on the program today. So next week, certainly, hopefully we'll continue with this discussion. Thank you.